Hi everyone. This is
so
Craig
great.
Zelzer from PCDN. Welcome to season 14 of the Social Change Career Podcast, episode 1. Happy 2025, obviously a challenging time in the world. Today we're going to be talking with Okay, hold on. Hello, can you hear me now? No?
I can hear you.
Okay, we're having a little bit of technical difficulties. Can you hear me? Maybe try taking your headphones off. Sorry everyone, we'll get started in a minute. Maybe try without headphones. Listen. We'll get started in. Can you hear me now?
Can you hear me now?
We were having a little bit of technical difficulties. Let me know if you can hear me, Pravin. Is it working? Because it shows on my end that it's working. Everyone have a little bit of patience as we work on this technical. Is it working? Because it shows. Just 2 seconds. I'm going to message Pravin. Sorry, everyone. Technical challenges happen. So I asked Pravin to refresh, and we'll see if that works. So this is part of the new tech world. So he should be back in a minute, and thank you for your patience. So again, I'll start a formal introduction in a few minutes, but while we're waiting, if people want to share where you're watching from, and I'm confident that this will be addressed within a minute or two, but please let us know where you're watching from, and I'm just waiting for Pravin to come back in. Hopefully he will be here. So let us know where you're watching from, if you have any questions. And again, we have 170 episodes of the podcast. Let me just let Pravin back in, and hopefully it'll work this time.
Hi.
Is it working now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Okay, that's better. Yes,
How's the sound?
it's pretty good. Okay. So I
Great.
was just let me switch sides with you on the screen.
Okay.
Okay, everyone. I was just saying apologies for the technical difficulties. It happens. It's part of the. I'll edit this out on the podcast episode. Okay. So let me just make sure we're aligned. So we'll start in 30 seconds. I'm just adjusting our size of our, so you can see that. Okay. One more thing. Okay, so thank you everyone for technical challenges. It's even in an IT AI world, we still have these things, but thank you, Pravin, for your diligence. So this will be edited out in the podcast. So welcome to season 14 of the Social Change Career Podcast. This is episode 1. Happy 2025. And Pravin will be talking about building impactful careers through purpose-driven ventures. And for people who have not joined the Social Change Career Podcast previously, this is live stream, so it usually goes about an hour. We really enjoy hearing from the audience who might be engaging with us now. So at any time, particularly on LinkedIn, feel free in the chat to share where you're watching from, your questions, and your comments, and we'll try to weave them in as much as possible. This is one of over 170 episodes, so it's a labor of love, featuring leading innovators, sharing honest, actionable insights on impact careers from all over the world, from impact investors to heads of NGOs to impact investors. I already said impact, to heads of foundations and activists and almost anything you can imagine. Most people are pretty senior, but we also have junior people. So if you go to PCN Global Listen, you can search across all the episodes and I'm sure find 5 to 10 to 20 that fit your interest, or in any major podcasting platform. 3 quick requests before I talk a little bit more about Pravin. If you like the podcast, please consider sharing it. Follow Pravin on LinkedIn and other channels, and PCDN. So his bio, he is a multidisciplinary business leader and impact investor with extensive experience creating organizational change and building sustainable business value. He's the founder and managing partner of Espera Ventures. He leads investments in early growth enterprises that contribute to sustainable development while pursuing strong financial returns. He has strong expertise spanning financial services, clean technology, healthcare, and retail. He's also spent decades advising and scaling purpose driven organizations. He is also the founder and principal of Mentis Management Solutions, which provides strategy and advisory services for large scale transformations. Additionally, through his work at Path and Purpose, fantastic name, he helps young people discover their purpose and build impactful careers. I'm based in Medellin, Colombia. And Pravin, I forgot which town you're located or city in
It's
Canada.
in Toronto. Well, it's actually Oakville, which is just west of Toronto, but yeah, Toronto,
Okay.
Canada.
Okay, so thank you so much for making time to share your wisdom, and hopefully it's not too cold in your area. It's Medellin's a city of eternal spring, so I can't complain about weather. So can you share a little bit when you were younger, not that you're old, but when you were younger, how did you envision a potential career path? So did you aspire to be an engineer, a doctor, a teacher? And how in the world or where did impact first pop up in your career or studies?
Mm-hmm. Interestingly enough, I actually started out studying engineering, and very quickly realized that it wasn't for me. In fact, after like a month or two into my first year at university, I just found it too far removed from what I wanted to do in business. And actually, um, one of my roommates was reading a book and he looked like so immersed in it. And I asked him, well, what's that? And he said, "Look, it's economics." And I'm like, okay, give me like 30 minutes, Cole's notes on economics. And he did. And that's basically what prompted me, because I just sort of fell in love with it. And so I did an undergrad degree in economics. Coming out of high school, I was a pretty good writer. I had a teacher who took me under her wing and really wanted me to become a journalist. And because I wrote short stories and poems and that sort of thing. Um, and I really value that creative side of me, and in fact, it's become more and more prominent in my career. But I really wanted to do something in business. But back then, the advice that you got, and your parents can advise you to a degree. A lot of parents push their kids into something or the other. My parents never did. They just wanted me to be happy. And uh, the guidance counselors kind of take a very linear approach. It's like, okay, you do really well in chemistry, math, and so on and so forth. I think engineering is the thing for you. And of course, when you're young, you're kind of like, okay, yeah, it sounds prestigious, and if I apply and I get in, wow, like So I did, and it just caused quite a bit of turmoil. But the interesting thing is that as my career evolved over time and with my consulting firm, I actually ended up managing large teams that included engineers and quality assurance people and marketing people and so on and so forth. Um, so what I learned out of that experience is that you know it's really a benefit to anyone to get a wide range of experiences in various functions of business, because what it allows you to do is look at business, but also social ventures in a very holistic manner, right? Because you know enough to be well versed in marketing. Finance underpins everything I do, and I've heard it said, like, don't go into marketing unless you like numbers. But I've worked in operations, I've carried quota in sales, I've done strategic partnerships, and then as far as sector goes, I've worked in software, hardware, healthcare, media, financial services, telecom. So but that's me. Like, that's something I really need, is a lot of variety and the ability to kind of flit between subject matter to keep me really interested and engaged. And this ethos has kind of really helped me in the impact venture space, because essentially I'm taking somewhere between 6 and 8 meetings a day, and Obviously I don't invest in everything because you can't. But what you do have to do then is jump between, for example, a alternative energy firm on the one hand, and a ed tech on the other hand. Understand the basic tenets that would make these companies successful. And so, having that ability to kind of change your mind frame really quickly and get into the subject matter, and make assessments, based on your knowledge of multiple areas of business, I think is a very important thing. And I think it has really worked for me.
Thank you so much. We have people from around the world, a lot of people from Colombia. So welcome,
Excellent.
Marta. Marta, a friend who founded Cafe Lucas for coffee lovers.
Oh,
Pravin's
okay.
been to Colombia a bunch. We have people from US, Morocco, UK. So please keep letting us know where you're watching from, a bit about your work, and also weave in your questions and comments. So you've had a very diverse career and obviously a lot of different skill sets and roles, and often at a senior level. So one is I'm really curious to hear more about the aspiring journalist and creative part and how that's been integrated. But let's focus. So if you think back to your career in business, whether any one of these roles, whether it's retail or telecom or marketing, so where did purpose come up? And obviously, businesses, even if they're not thinking about social impact, there's a famous quote by Milton Friedman, which I disagree with, is the business of business is business. And if they do that business well and don't break the law, they're going to generate revenue, jobs, pay taxes. I
Yeah.
think, obviously, a business needs to be profitable to sustain its operations and stay afloat.
Hmm.
But where did purpose come from? So was it embedded in the work you did? You took a course, you attended a conference, or
Yeah.
so and where did you first become, I won't say aware, but kind of start to engage with this potentially wider role of business than just kind of operations and staying profitable?
Yeah. So, one thing is, one of the things that sort of prompted my career direction, and actually, um, me wanting to be independent and doing my own thing, was the birth of my children. Right. So I have twin boys who are now 23, and ironically enough, they're just finishing up engineering in materials. So, um, but essentially at that point I was really keen to be active and engaged with my own kids, because I'd wanted kids for a long time, for at least the first 10, 12 years of their life, because I'd done a lot of reading on early childhood education, um, and what it means to a child to have their parents really involved, but not just their parents, but also development at an early age. And I didn't want to be like a helicopter parent or something along those lines, but I wanted to be there when they needed me, essentially when at very important inflection points and that sort of thing. So that was one of the drivers. And I had worked for other people and worked in large corporations like Nortel and Xerox, and some of the banks. And one of the things is that I was in those roles, and I think many people on the call could probably identify with this. In many of those roles, um, while you're proud of the work that you're doing and it's meeting a need and it's fulfilling a purpose, the purpose might not be your own. Right? And I actually got quite frustrated with what I was seeing in corporations, especially large corporations that were driven, that are publicly traded. Um, and I was thinking to myself for quite a while, even though I you know, really valued the breadth of experience that working with these large corporations gave me and the various subject matter that I was involved in. Um, I just felt like something was missing, right? And interestingly enough, your children will sensitize you to a lot of things that are going on in the world that you may have identified but are kind of ignoring because you're too busy raising a family, building a life, and so on and so forth, right? So my kids are asking me questions about the environment and social issues and these types of things that I couldn't answer. Right? So one thing is, going back to this idea of the creative side of everybody. I think you ignore that at your peril. Analytics is fine, and you know that a lot of analytics is going to be replaced in the next 10 years. Whether it's venture capital, whether it's healthcare, it could be accounting, it could be any of these professions. Automation is going to be a big driver in the next 10 years. So where do you find your human satisfaction? It's got to be from your creative side, so you cannot ignore that. So when I finished my MBA like many years ago now, I really decided that I wanted to do a 180-degree turn and do things like marketing and things that really brought out your my creative side. And that's when I really started getting um, the various experience in various functional aspects of business. But still, something was missing. And then back in 2013, I then started looking. Well, in 2011, I started looking for programs. And at the ripe old age of 48, went back to do my second master's. And frankly, when I told my parents, I'm going back to school, and I'm going to be traveling to the UK, to Cambridge for the next 2 years, they kind of looked at me like like something was wrong with me, because it's like, oh well, you have a family, and you have kids, and so on and so forth. Um, but I was so driven by that need for finding the purpose of all of the skills that I had to do it. And I also tell anyone who will listen in their career that it's really important to take, at various inflection points, some calculated risks that really then, sort of open your mind and open your possibilities. And nothing. I had somebody tell me once that, if it was easy, then everybody would be doing it. And this is when I was sort of contemplating, going back to do my MBA full time. So I'd have to quit my job and do all that kind of stuff. And at work, I was getting more and more responsibility, more and more promotions, and so on. And so it was kind of like, oh, I'm already getting advancement. Like, do I need the MBA type of thing, right? So this buddy of mine who sat right next to me, like quite a smart guy, but very plain spoken. When I told him about my dilemma, he said to me, and he had a few expletives in there, but he basically said, yeah, like, Praveen, if it was easy, everyone would be doing it. So I think it's really important to kind of really challenge yourself in terms of, what am I doing now? Is it really fulfilling, my purpose? Is it, because everyone talks to you about the how and the what, and that's the reason behind the program that I developed. I actually developed it for my own kids, path and purpose, because if path is the how and the what of your life, like your education, your work experience, and so on and so forth, then a lot of people don't ask you about the why, right? So you're doing all this stuff, and you're not really paying attention to the why part of it, right? And that'll catch up with you, because at some point or the other, you're going to be very, frustrated or searching. And that leads to a lot of things like self sabotage. It can be, you know, uh, you know, people talk a lot about stress, and stress is obviously always internalized, so you don't necessarily show it on the surface, but deep down, there's something that's holding you back, and it's because you haven't asked the question why. So after I did this master's in sustainability at Cambridge, like, that's when everything clicked to me. Although I had, I was quite opinionated about social issues and the environment and so on. I didn't have the frameworks to actually say, well, how do I take all this? purposeful thinking that I have, and then structure it and actually make an impact, right? So at Cambridge, my supervisor for my dissertation got me involved in the Unilever Awards, and I was a judge in that for 3 years, like an assessor in that for 3 years running. And I was really good at sort of picking the good business models, the good management teams. And and I said, well, look, if you believe in all this stuff, then it's probably time to start putting some money behind that. And that's when I started my own angel fund. And it was kind of serendipity that I actually started investing in LATAM, because on the back of having the program Path and Purpose, I got invited down to Latin American leadership at boot camps, and there I met other social entrepreneurs, um, and and it clicked for me that with the money that I had, that Latin America was a good choice to actually expand my impact because of the valuations there, but also because of my own ethnic background. I feel very, very comfortable in Latin America. So I'm from the Catholic region of India, where Vasco da Gama landed and had a colony in Goa. So I'm Catholic. I have a Hindu first name. I have a Portuguese last name, and I'm Catholic. I'm pretty secular. I'm not like extremely religious or anything like that. But I feel very fortunate to sort of have my feet in both worlds. And in Latin America, when I come there, I find a lot of cultural similarities between my own heritage and Latin America. And, Colombians have been nothing but welcoming to me. I get actually kind of emotional when I talk about it. And sure, there are some people who are, kind of suspicious, I guess, in a way. It's like, okay, you were you're born in Africa. You emigrated to Canada as a refugee like a long time ago. Um, you know, um, so you're a Canadian citizen, and now you've invested in Latin America. So what's going on, right? so so sometimes you have to explain that to people, but I don't think you can let that stop you. If you by nature, I think people who want to be involved in impact have to know that it's going to be a slog, and that you're kind of you're fighting a bit of an uphill battle, but you can definitely have successes. And so, if you're choosing an impact career, I think passion has to play a really big role, because as I said, it's not easy, but it's very, very satisfying.
I have a million questions, but they're starting to come in from people watching, so I want to weave those in.
Sure,
Um, but
sure.
but were you born in Uganda or East Africa?
In Uganda, yeah,
Yeah. So people, we won't get into the whole history. Um,
yeah.
and please check out the University of Cambridge programs, Latin American Leadership Academy. Amazing. The headquarters are like a 5-10 minute walk from my house, and it's an amazing group of young people, and they're do virtual stuff, and they're in Colombia, Brazil, Mexico, Peru a little bit. So if
Uh,
you are either looking as a potential mentor or a young person, I think it's 14 to 19. I've got the age
yeah,
category.
it's
Yeah.
it's like in that range, like up to 20 some
Okay.
21, 22, something like that.
So
Uh,
first question comes from Sohini, who's based Sakar, who's based in DC, and this goes back
okay.
to one of your earlier things. In the current climate, do large corporations need to mainstream social responsibility as part of their growth and profitability strategy? So it's a big question, but your kind of
Uh, yeah,
big picture
I mean, I
thoughts on
think
how to ground it.
no, and I think it's very prescient, in the sense that you see what's going on, with governments, and like there's this ongoing struggle between that. We need to really think about growth and profitability, but there are only so many resources in the world, um, and I think so. In at Cambridge, our group project that we worked on was around the valuation of natural capital, and this is like really important to, for example, Colombia or Brazil. Um, And we interviewed people like in the financial system all over the world, in governments, and so on and so forth. And the kind of questions we asked are, um, you know, um, do you think that the value of natural capital is baked into the financial system, into the valuation of stocks, for example, or whatever it is? And everyone would just be like, oh yeah, yeah, of course, like it's markets are forward looking, and and of course, like we all have risk functions, and therefore, absolutely, we consider environmental degradation and the risks of climate change in everything we do. But there are people who actually believe that if you actually accounted for all of the externalities that are out there right now, most stocks would be 25 to 30% less in value, right? So, so no matter how you look at it, you know, many many large companies, like including the large beverage companies and resource companies and so on, rely on the things that nature gives us, right? And they can, in the future, their value and their profitability can really suffer if they don't think about social and environmental responsibility. So I think it's absolutely necessary for companies to definitely bake that in. And as a person working in any function in any large corporation, I encourage people to continue to ask questions of their leaders as to whether what they tout in terms of social or environmental responsibility, either in their non-financial reporting in their annual reports, or in the marketing that they do to consumers, or business to business, whether it's window dressing or whether it's real. And everybody has a role to play, whether you're in marketing, whether you're in finance, whether you're in operations, sales, strategy. Everyone has a role to play to ask those questions. You may get uncomfortable responses, or you may get non-responses, but all of us, I think it's incumbent on all of us to ask questions. And I think it's very powerful just to ask the question. You don't have to accuse anybody. You don't have to sort of start controversies, but just asking pointed questions of your leaders, I think, is really important.
So, really interesting comments, and I have a follow-up question. Then there's a question from Suzanne, and please keep the questions and comments coming. And for those just joining, let us know where you're watching from. Um, so, so, so actually, two questions. So one is, I think about this a lot. We were talking before we started the podcast, and we've talked multiple times. Um, is there an example of a publicly traded company that actually fully integrates triple bottom line, like people, planet, profit, or natural capital, from sourcing, supply chain, to how they treat their workers, to how they treat their stakeholders, to how they manufacture or provide services, to end of life? And I'm increasingly convinced. I think there's companies that parts of those companies do that, but like I guess one is like, is it even feasible in the way the system is built that a company that grows and becomes public could do that?
Mm-hmm.
And and then your thoughts on that. And the second one is just like, what are the some examples either of sectors or companies that are doing this, doing at least parts of this well, or where
Mm-hmm.
would what gives you hope?
I think the reality is that our current system is based on the concept of more, that more is better, right? So more consumption, more production, more supply, volume driven businesses, and so on and so forth. So every consumer driven business, and every even B2B business that's in the supply chain, um, and especially if they're publicly traded, they all depend on bettering last quarter's performance. So if you're doing that, right, how do you justify? How do you come to that balance between more consumption of resources and so on and so forth, and sustainability. It's extremely difficult. But I would say, this idea of the business of business is business versus, companies must pay attention to their responsibility to society, I think is something we're going to continue to struggle with, because our capitalist system is, changing very slowly, although there are a lot of people really pushing against, the the historical thinking on capitalism. Um, I have one of my classmates, for example, was like headed up sustainability for Chipotle, and then now is the senior leader in Whole Foods. And I see a lot of what she's doing as being, really the types of things that you need to do in a model where consumption is at the heart of it, right? So first of all, what is the product you're selling, right? So the product you're selling itself should be geared towards, like this is obviously a food business, so it's geared towards various aspects of society, like health and consumption in a healthy manner, and so on and so forth. But then behind all of that, there are farmers, there are suppliers, um, there are employees. There's a lot of different aspects of large corporations, but even medium corporations and smaller ones that you consider in your business model. So I think when you look at, the place that you're working in, or the place that you're looking to go and work at, um, sometimes you can risk jumping out of the frying pan and then into the fire, because you think it's greener on the other side. But what I would say is, look at those companies holistically, all the way from what they're doing in their supply chain. Like I always find it, really interesting when, I see sustainability stuff from some of these really large, soft drink manufacturers, for example, because water is at the heart of that business model, right? And so, what are they doing to ensure that, we don't create water scarcity? And then on the business model side, in some places in the world, cola is cheaper than water, right? So you have to look at these things very holistically, and in a systems thinking kind of a way. Think of it, a corporation as a fire hose that's got a bunch of little holes in it, and you go to fix something in one area, you put your finger over the hole, and the water starts to come out heavily through another hole. So it's really important to look at a company holistically. So to answer your question, I think there are like companies that are doing really good things, but I also think there are a lot of large companies, including, I think, a large sector of the financial system, including the banks, which I have done a lot of my work at, that are doing a lot of window dressing. Because on the one hand, they might have a $20 million fund to invest in young entrepreneurs in the sustainability space, and on the other hand, they're lending really big amounts of money to very polluting industries, to companies that have really poor policies in terms of in terms of labor, in terms of their labor policies. In some cases, they're funding businesses which in the background have illegal practices that they don't really, look at. So I don't want to go hard on the banks, but look at all of these things, with a very pragmatic view.
Yeah, thanks so much. And just two comments. Obviously, I mean, I have friends I've been to Coca Cola headquarters, to the museum, and one time Net Impact, they had their annual conference. One of the networks from Business for Purpose that's been around like 30 years. They had their one of their receptions in the museum, so we're all drinking Coca-Cola. And I have friends who got scholarships, so they do good
Sure,
stuff. But then if you look
of
at
course.
fundamentally the products, it's sugar water or water that's taken from public things and plastic that is not recycled. And so it's like the product itself is fundamentally unhealthy. And then everything from the sourcing to the end of life use. I mean, in Colombia, there's a lot more recycling than in the US because of
Yeah,
street recyclers. But then you drive through certain parts of the country and it's just plastic garbage everywhere. So it's
yeah,
like, it's just, but I do want to say for banking, the for people who are interested, and we'll get into this. I want to get to Suzanne's questions, but there is the Global Alliance for Banking on Values, which is a network of, you know, the members have to commit and not just say but demonstrate.
yeah.
Some are B Corps, and so like there's a bank that we is traded publicly called Amalgamated Bank in the U.S. It's a union bank. It's a B Corp,
Hmm.
and it's been around 100 years, and so we have some stock in it because I think one, it comes out of union values and they tend to be ethical in their practices. I mean, not all B Corps are as good as others, but
Yeah,
it's like, and then probably the most sustainable bank in the world that people talk about is Triodos Bank in the Netherlands, which has expanded. And if you even look at their headquarters, like from how they, so there are some examples of banking where it's not fundamentally
yeah,
financing prisons or extractive industries or weapons or or illegal actions, but there are banks, and that's one of the things we'll talk about is whether you have an organization or a company or an individual, where you choose to park, save, and invest your money is also where you choose to work. And obviously, we just had a session today about the crazy changes by U.S. government and how many people that's impacting. This was just on more careers, and a lot of people are losing their jobs. But
yeah.
next question is from Suzanne, and I couldn't get it to show on the screen, but it says thank you. She's based in Berkeley.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rodriguez. It would be great to have your advice on how those of us engaged on the research, policy, and services side might pivot from government funded work to the private sector, thinking about how we can apply our expertise at companies with real commitment to social and environment, and governance. So any thoughts? I mean, obviously this is, we could be in a trade war with Canada. We are in trade war with some places, but the current policies of the US government are, it's drill baby drill. Anything about equity is gone, gender inclusion. It's, and a lot of people in government and other sectors are going to be losing their jobs. It's going to be brutal. So just
Hmm.
any thoughts, whether it's specific to the US or not, in terms of how people can pivot across not just roles, but sectors?
Yeah. So one thing I've seen is, and I've seen this in Canada as well. And it's actually one of the reasons that I did my dissertation on the clean tech sector globally, and the location decisions of clean tech founders throughout the venture cycle. Because I was really interested in studying like how do you initiate, encourage, and sustain a clean tech sector in your country, because for many years in Canada, people would get to a certain stage in their ventures and then would be looking for funding. And we didn't, in Canada, we didn't have like a really well developed, angel investing um, sector or whatever. And governments were, kind of loath to pick winners, right? Um, and yet, and so we actually saw a lot of our companies then end up going to Silicon Valley or Germany. But despite that, and now we do have government agencies that are actually involved in the sustainability sector, and they recognize the value that the green economy and specifically clean tech can create. Um, uh, you know, um, it has flourished, I would say, despite government, as opposed to because of government. So we have a very vibrant clean tech sector here in Canada now, and technology and business will find a way. And so, how I see governments, also come and go, potentially every 4 years, but then you have midterm elections, and there's like just a lot of churn. And as I said, governments are loath to pick winners. So 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 I think it's the private sector that has the most potential to actually make change in the world, all the way from small businesses up to very large corporations. So to answer your question, the skill set that you have in the research area, I think is going to be very, very valuable in the private sector because data drives everything now. So so when people in startup ventures go looking for money and so on and so forth, investors are actually looking the for the data that supports that this company will have a good market, and the demand for those products and services. So there's actually a lot that your skill set can help with in the private sector. So you could be in the strategy side in small ventures all the way up to large corporations. You could be in marketing because marketing nowadays is very, very data driven. And so actually, making the business case around certain things like education, the environment, other really meaty policy areas. I think leveraging your current skill sets is going to really benefit you. And the way to sort of then transition that from being in government, and actually I worked in the government in finance for a few years after my undergrad, is to go and get like certifications. You don't have to go and do what I did, which is go and take more formal education. Although that's what I wanted to do, but I think certifications in very specific things are important, and that allow you to transition to the private sector, and then networking at various events where you can start to see the commonality and the use for your skill sets in the private sector.
So thank you so much. There's a lot of chat going on in LinkedIn where people are sharing resources, and some of our future guests, Yuri, who's based in Colombia and does amazing work with Indigenous and Afro-Colombian communities, but actually is in Hawaii this week,
Oh,
coming up.
awesome.
I think in a month actually. And Suzanne said thank you very much, and she's working on an AI tool. I mean, not that AI is the essentials, but what she said is working an AI tool to help in scaling research for decision making. Just to put a plug out there, I'm facilitating just one section of a course on AI safety governance for an organization called Blue Dot. I mean, I do a lot of work with AI, ethical AI.
Hmm.
So Blue Dot they got a lot of funding from Open Philanthropy and Effective Altruism, and they offer tons of courses on all things AI. I think they're still recruiting for an AI economics fellow. Deadline's tomorrow, I think, don't quote me on this, but we have about 500 people in the course. But they pay facilitators, and then I think all their courses or most are free. Maybe they ask for donations. So obviously, AI is the hot thing for now, and really thinking about how to use it ethically. So just as people think about upskilling in careers,
Hmm.
I want to go back to one thing you said, and others, please feel free to let us know where you're watching from, your questions, and also where you're looking for help and where you can offer help. But one thing you said, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. So I've switched careers multiple times, and I really appreciate what you said. And I've heard someone say, I don't remember where I heard this once. I mean, and it's also a privilege because some people, like the job market is brutal, and some countries have very high unemployment. So it's also, I mean, I wish everyone in the world could work on something related to impact that fits their skills and passion. But
Yeah.
that's also kind of like a privileged thing because lots of people don't have that choice, or it's very hard to find the pathway, or they don't have any financial security. And when I have switched careers, like there's terror, sleepless nights, frustration, anxiety. Like, it is not easy. And I come from a somewhat privileged position. So for people who are like in something and they have this, they don't want to build more widgets or market more detergent, or they just feel like this is fine, but like the world is on fire, literally. And
Hmm.
your thoughts and you've talked about this a lot in terms of your upskilling path and doing the MBA and then doing the Master's in Sustainability and networking and learning. And a lot of this also came from your children asking questions. But just any other thoughts, like if it's easy, everyone will be doing it. And it's a calculated risk, to whether you're going for upskilling. I mean, if you have a job and it's fine and you can upskill while you're doing it,
Hmm.
or you have some stable income or you've got family or partners or savings. But
Yeah.
just thoughts like your advice, how to think about making that decision,
Hmm.
especially when the nature of employment is in such flux, whether it's impact careers or not.
Right. So, so the first thing I will say is, I don't encourage anyone to, like, get to a point of frustration where you, as I mentioned before, maybe self sabotage, or you just say, "That's it, I'm quitting my job and I'm going to go and do something else," and you don't know yet what that something else is. So I don't encourage anyone to just take that leap, right? Because I do think it's important. Part of mental health is being able to be stable in your finances and so on and so forth. Um, but what I would say is that there's kind of four, Craig and I were talking about this before the call, kind of four essential ways to satisfy that need as a human being to create impact, right? So um, there's where do you work, right? There's what do you consume, what do you invest in, and then those all involve money, obviously, and then the last part is what are your other purpose driven activities. So for example, I've sat on the board of a charity. I mentor young people. I do a lot of things that don't pay me anything, but I get so much return out of, if you will, by doing them, and a lot of personal satisfaction. And I think I would suggest that to anyone, that never underestimate, how much you get back from those things, right? Um, and then, in doing those kind of like non-paid activities, or getting involved in your community and satisfying that need to create an impact, that you feel that you're participating in a more wholesome, holistic way in the community and the country that you live in, but not just the country that you live in, because I'm very kind of this, global citizen mentality. And in fact, I've recently actually taken up the Mexican residency. So to add to the Africa, India, Canada sort of continuum, I've added Mexico to that. So I'm now a resident of Mexico as well, and I'm going down actually next Wednesday to renew that residency for the next 3 years. And I'm going to be making Mexico the base for the fund that I'm building. So to feel like you're part of your community, part of your country, part of the world, and you're actually making a difference, I would say that you have to look at all of those four things. Um, and then to your question about, with the job market being, what it is, um, how do you transition to something impactful while considering, the financial aspects of the move and so on and so forth? And I think, there's no easy answer to that question, but I do think it involves some risk taking, but it also involves some planning. So so back to this idea of not just jumping ship and then saying, I'm going to do something completely different. I think while you're working in what you're working, entertain some of your own harebrained ideas, right? And go out and explore if some of these things have legs, and prepare for an exit from what you're doing right now by really exploring those things, getting feedback from other people, collaborating with others. Nothing in the impact space gets done by individuals. Collaboration is the key to every kind of impact. And so, take some time while you have um, stability in your income and so on and so forth to investigate these different things. and then that can lead to and it might end in you starting a startup. It could end in you going to do something in the NGO sector. It could have, and nowadays there's a lot of confluence of those things, right? Public-private partnerships. Again, nothing can be done by government, the private sector, or NGOs alone. There's a lot of collaboration going on. So, sort of being involved in these various sectors allows you then to move between them, right?
So thanks so much. So next question comes from Yura Sapi, who's going to be on our podcast again in a month, who works in Choco with Afro and Indigenous Colombians, and also is an artist and has a great community. And so, she wants to know, as an impact investor, what do you look for and what stands out when you potentially invest in organizations or startups? And, and maybe related to that, can you share maybe one or two, not to single out any favorites, but some examples of, maybe not in terms of the impact, but what they're actually building, doing, or
Sure,
the ones that just make you go, wow, and you want everyone in the world to know about it.
sure. So first off, I decided, through this process of adding education and so on and so forth, that my next, or like the remainder of my career in my next 20 years, is all about impact, and more specifically trying to divert capital flows from the mainstream to sustainable ventures, right? So that kind of is overarches everything that I do, because I think, in order for us to reverse some of the trajectories that we're on right now, it's going to take billions, if not trillions, of dollars in investment to do. And I'm just playing my small part. But in doing that, and speaking to young people about having impactful and purposeful careers, I'm having like a ripple effect, right? Um, so to answer the question, in my angel fund, I essentially have two pillars. One is clean tech, climate tech, because that's a burning platform. Everybody knows, like, we're in trouble there. And then the other one is what I call social impact ventures. So fintech for financial inclusion, health tech, because a lot of people don't have access to good health care at a reasonable cost. Ed tech, because education, and many people don't have access to education because it's can be very expensive, especially post secondary education. So ed tech. Um, um, so what did I say? Fintech, health tech, ed tech, and ag tech. So these are I think the ventures that have the largest potential to impact lives and livelihoods, and definitely in these are all sort of global areas where there's a lot of impact to be made. But especially in Latin America, these four are really important. And then the fifth one is fifth and sixth one. The fifth one is nature-based solutions. So, for example, reforestation and generating carbon credits and those types of things. And then finally, opportunistically, I think property tech, can be a place for impact. I'm looking at a company right now in Canada, because the prices of housing are so high, where they're doing a model whereby people can buy fractional parts of a property and join together to buy a property and actually live together in that property. But some of the things that I've invested in that are kind of really close to my heart. One I can say right away is a company out of so it's my first Mexico investment, and I did it at the end of last year. It's a company that's taking the invasive seaweed species out of the Caribbean Ocean, because it's actually degrading um, regional GDP in the Yucatan by about 11%, both on the tourism point of view, but also off the coast of the Yucatan is the the second largest barrier reef in the world, so it's affecting fish and so on. But also because the property that I bought in Mexico is actually in Tulum. Um, so what she's doing is she's an Oxford PhD in nanotechnology. She was born in Mexico and she lives now in the Yucatan, and she is harvesting that, or at least other companies are harvesting the invasive seaweed, but then she's processing it and making bioplastics out of that, both foams and films, that will replace a lot of plastic, right? Another company that I invested in Colombia kind of has a stranglehold on the returned handset market, and he's refurbishing all of these Apple devices and Android devices, and then he is new software, um, upgrading batteries if needed, and maybe screens and so on and so forth, and then taking that to the to market, but in such a way that the experience for somebody is as good as unboxing a brand new iPhone or whatever it is. But the time to affordability, and in Latin America, obviously now, you know, everyone's connected, and if you're not connected, you're at a disadvantage. Um, so the time to affordability for people with lower incomes is being reduced heavily by that company. He's a young entrepreneur, very passionate about what he's doing, and I went to visit the plant actually the last time I was in Colombia. So there's that. Then there's another company. And I'll just give you this one example, then I'll answer the question about what do I look for. Another company is creating thousands upon thousands of e-commerce entrepreneurs all over Latin America and the southern United States, by selling these courses on how to do e-commerce well. They're really kind of the courses are not cheap, but their completion rates of those courses are really high, like in the 97% range. And these new e-commerce entrepreneurs are actually seeing changes in their livelihoods and in their wealth, and being able to educate their kids and so on and so forth. So that's really something that's very important to me. And now, because these companies all need to something to sell, whether it's like a digital project, a product, or something tangible, they're also getting into the supply chain to actually be able to provide them with products. But going back to the question about what do I look for, I look for the business model, is pursuing one or more sustainable development goal. So I'll just give you my thesis. It's pursuing one or more sustainable development goal, and if it's just one, then it must be at the heart of your business model. So it's not, you're a strip mining company that pollutes locally, and by the way, you're recycling, right? Then the second part of it is that you leverage technology, either proprietary or open source, to be able to scale your business very quickly. The third aspect of the thesis is that your ambition must be greater than just your domestic market. So many of the companies that I've invested in Colombia, they're already growing regionally, like in Mexico and Chile and other places. And then the unwritten part of the thesis is there potential for a soft landing in other countries, like in the US or in Canada, where they can tackle other markets like Europe and so on, and raise more money. And then the fifth thing, which I think is the most important, is how can I actually help these companies, right? Because there's a lot of different places they can go get their money. But if I feel that I can actually help them with revenue or partnerships or advice from an operational point of view or financial point of view, then I will get involved. It's like my goal with my funds are to be relatively active with my companies, and earn my multiples. It's not a model of like, okay, here's some money and give me a return. I'm just going to exit and that's the end of it. That's not what I'm about.
Amazing. And so, I mean, my wife and I, we do small scale angel investing in impact startups, similar, but, a little bit and a lot rather than a lot and a little. But it's again, some of the, including in LATAM, and there's one in Mexico called Siglo, which is using mesh networks to create affordable Wi-Fi. And they just signed a partnership with Walmart, or one in Chile, which is trying to make solar called Roof. And, a lot of those things give me hope.
Yeah.
So
Which
a
reminds, which,
couple.
which reminds me, I should probably pick your brain for deal flow
Yeah.
for the new fund.
Yes, and actually, please, we'll do this offline. But if you can send me the names of the companies you feel comfortable sharing, we'll put them in the show notes. But
Sure.
that's just because they're all sound amazing.
Sure.
Um, so one more question about Espera, and then two or three more questions, and we'll start to wrap up. And again, if anyone else has other questions or comments, feel free to let us know. So for Espera Ventures, how did you choose the name? And then, like, if someone is watching today or has a colleague or listens to the audio podcast and they either have got a startup that they think fits this criteria or they know somebody, like, how does someone potentially approach, like, what's your process?
Sure. Um, so the interesting thing was when I made the decision to do this in 2017. I actually was looking for a non-English word for hope, and then I looked at Latin, I looked at a few different languages, and then in the end, Esperanza came to mind because it means hope in Spanish, right? But Esperanza is 4 syllables, and I thought maybe it's a bit too long, and so on. And so I shortened it to Espera, and then of course in Spanish Espera means wait, right? So kind of like the entire opposite of a name that you would give a VC firm, where people are looking for for sort of like where traditionally in VC they're looking for quick exits and a return quickly. But you know what? I'm actually quite happy with it, because this idea of being patient capital, I think, is a really powerful thing, and I want the companies that I work with to understand that I'm not looking to, like, although I'd like to see traction and I'd like to see growth that suggests returns and profitability, obviously, because that's what the business is about. I'm not the kind of investor where I'm not going to be patient and try to help you to grow, right? So I think Espera is actually a perfect name for the fund. And and when I'm going from like the angel fund to the VC fund, there were other names kind of bandied about, and we are going to go with something like Verdea or whatever. And then when I spoke to people in Latin America, because the fund is all about Latin America, they were like, "You're crazy! Like, everybody knows your fund, everyone knows you, they trust you. So why not just go to Espera Capital?" And so that's what I decided to do. Um, as far as my process goes, I allocate a certain amount of time to actually looking for deals, and then I actually am collaborate with a lot of different VCs. I'm also active in the accelerator ecosystem in Latin America. I'm a mentor in a couple, and I go to VC Week in Colombia, which is coming up in April. But at the end of February, there's a large impact investing conference in the Yucatan in Merida called it's the Latin American Impact Investing Forum. So I see a lot of deal flow there, but then I also share with other VCs and so on. But I also allocate a proportion of my time to just reading decks. So if someone has an idea, or they've actually started a business, or they want to start a business, I will actually review what they have. One, because it keeps my mind sharp, going back to this idea of being able to flit between subject matter, and also because if somebody trusts me enough to come and ask me about what I think about their business, then I feel it's incumbent upon me to actually give them the time of day. So what I do is actually review decks. And if I can't invest in them either because it doesn't fit my thesis or because, I don't have enough to do all of them, obviously, then I will actually put them onto other people who I believe could help them as well. So that's essentially my process. And then, in co-investing, you actually do due diligence together, so you can rely on the due diligence of a lead, or if you're leading, then you can do the due diligence and that sort of thing. But it all starts with the team. How committed is the team that's doing this? And going back to this question of why this business, why this market, and why these particular people? Because there could be other people trying to do that business as well, and who's to say which team is the one that's actually going to get it done, right? So those are the criteria.
Okay. Um, so to start wrapping up, thank you so much, and please follow Pravin on LinkedIn and go to Espera Ventures. Um, what kind of skills are you working on learning these days? Because obviously, I think it's clear you're a lifelong learner, and that is probably the number one skill these days because things are moving fast. So, not that you have to be learning something new, but what are you either strengthening or seeking to learn or learning?
Yeah. So one thing I'm kind of hard on myself about is that I've been investing in Latin America for 7 years, and my Spanish is still not where I want it to be. And that's because I think in part, and I'm not blaming anybody else, but when I go to Latin America, a lot of people just speak to me in English, right? And it's not like you cannot, I love languages. So I grew up, well, in Africa, the system was the British system, so we learned in English. When I came to Canada, I did French all the way up to the end of high school, and actually I can do reasonably well either in France or in Canada in French. And then when I was in my early teenage years, my mom brought her parents from India, and my mom told me, okay, your grandfather is your responsibility. And Konkani, which is our is a a dialect of Southwest India and is very a regional language, and so not many people in the world speak it. I'm fluent in that because I had to take care of my grandfather, and he only spoke that language, right? And I'm really proud of the fact that I know my native language, or at least my parents' native language. So I feel like I should be further ahead in Spanish, and so I'm really, going to push on that. Going and doing it through some of like the language apps and so on is one thing, but then being able to hold a conversation and being able to have your mouth process what your brain is thinking, is a whole nother thing. So that's really important to me. And then I think the other skill set that I'm trying to do, like I already think I think this way, but I think I want to be better at it, is kind of really, reading more and really kind of understanding what's happening in the world in order to be able to understand where everything is going. And I know this sounds like a very ambitious goal, but I think if you don't focus on a goal, then you're only going to have a cursory understanding of everything. So really doing a lot of reading. There's a book that's been recommended to me in a panel that I did last week. It's called The Fourth Turning. So I'm going to read that. That's a recommendation to all of the listeners. And then you know in Path and Purpose, I sensitize young people to some of the largest trends that are happening in the world right now, like the rise of data, really understand demographics. So, for example, when I go to investors and I talk about the demographics in Europe versus North America versus Latin America, and how the demographics in Latin America, and of course Africa as well, are very attractive because of the age of the average or the median age of the population in those regions. Data is very important. So, and then of course, climate change is really important. So, really understanding sort of like the 7 to 10 key drivers for the next 25 years will help you a lot in your career and really help you understand where things are going and how your skills can sort of fit into that narrative, I think is really important.
So last two questions, great advice. So, you talked about the fourth turning, any podcast, movies, TV shows that are occupying your brain in a positive way? It doesn't have to have anything to do with work, but just something that could be related to work or social impact, or could just be something that, is kind of
Yeah.
ruminating.
Podcasts, I mean, I haven't had a lot of time to like listen to a lot of podcasts, although I do watch some of the stuff that you do and so on. Um, I like podcasts that talk about ventures. So like Shark Tank, for example, is a very pop way to kind of present ventures and that and the whole investing process and so on. But I think everybody should be well versed in impact investing and the asset class of ventures. I think because I think ventures will change the world. um, the creativity of a lot of these entrepreneurs are gonna change the world. And then you can take lessons from a lot of the popular sort of well written and thought out shows. So for if you look, for example, at Game of Thrones or some of those things, there's a lot of lessons actually to be learned in that. And especially because you kind of see now in the world that effectively it feels like we're going back to this feudal system. You have oligarchs everywhere that are kind of trying to control everything from healthcare to to wages to that type of thing. And really kind of understanding the political situation, I think, is really important too, because when you want to make impact, you need to learn to navigate that and understand um, where the places are that you can make the most impact. And so understanding the politics and doing a lot of reading on different countries and different regions and stuff like that, I think is really, really important. Because we have actually a lot of lessons to learn. Like I don't go to Latin America saying, "Oh, I'm gonna teach you something," and I'm gonna do. No, I've learned more in the last 7 years, and I feel like I've learned my whole life by interacting with entrepreneurs in Latin America and in the entrepreneurial ecosystem at large. So keep an open mind. Understand that every interaction is an opportunity to learn. Be humble about how you approach people, and I think that's going to serve you well.
And then thanks so much. And then the last question, what is the two parts? So what is the best channel to follow you on? So is it LinkedIn or somewhere else? And then if people want to just stay up to date, is there a newsletter or you post on LinkedIn or,
Yeah.
or
I don't have
videos
a
or?
I don't have a regular newsletter that I do, but LinkedIn is the best way to kind of understand what I'm doing. And then the other thing is I am pretty open about people contacting me, especially on WhatsApp, relating to ideas on particular ventures or whatever. But I also have a passion for youth development. So, you know, um, people who may want a thought partner, and this is not like I don't get paid for this or anything like that, but as a thought partner for helping them, navigate a decision. I'm not directive. I don't tell people what to do, but I help them with resources and kind of thought partnership to kind of help them in some of the things that they're struggling with. Um, but not even if they're struggling with something, but something they even want to just talk about with respect to something positive that they're engaged in. So I love doing that because I love to see other people succeed. And part of what I want to do is I want to go back to this idea of that ripples of impact through other people, because I think that's the way you can maximize the impact that you make.
Yes, I wish I 100% agree. And I think the more that I interact with people outside of whatever I define as my own sectors with humility, like the better off I and others are. And the more, some sectors I know a lot about, but if I talk to, design thinkers or architects or urban planners, which I mean, I will not become an urban planner, but the more I learn about is like how we build cities,
Yeah,
just yeah, so stuff like that. And I think humility and curiosity are amazing. And you did get a comment from someone named Laura who, she said if you want to speak Spanish, she's happy to. So that's,
sure.
maybe a little Spanish group, and then obviously you can use ChatGPT, a paid version. There's a lot,
Yeah,
you can do full language tutoring, but there's a
yeah,
lot of things happening. So thank
yeah,
you so much for taking time and sharing your wisdom and process. And maybe that's going to be part of, if you write a book in the future, if it's easy, everybody would be doing it, or kind of the reverse, how to
yeah,
make it easy, that everybody would be doing it. I think,
right.
because and obviously in the startup world, do the hard thing first, or do
Yeah,
the hard things, because there's, so I see a future book or blog series or something in your future that maybe
yeah.
combines the two, because you don't
Oh,
want to make it exclusive or too hard, but it's also, there's got
yeah,
to be some hurdles. And as we started off with, thank you everyone for watching from around the world and engaging. So this audio version, with editing, so we had a little bit of challenges in the beginning, will be up the following Friday, so Valentine's Day, at least in the US. And then please consider sharing and rating the podcast. We have 170 episodes. Um, our next one is the 13th with Awal Agibe from Nigeria, who's been doing really interesting work on development and across Africa. And we'll be talking also about kind of the development sector. And he's doing a lot of work helping West African organizations get the funds they need. And obviously, it'll be interesting in this time. And Yuri, who was on chatting with us, she'll be on in March. Please follow Pravin on LinkedIn. Feel free to get in touch with him. Follow PCDN. And thank you so much. Any last words or asks
no,
from
I,
your end?
I would just want to thank you, Craig, for actually having me on. It's been a pleasure, and we've had a relationship going back now a few years, and a lot of contact. So I really appreciate that. But I also want to thank all of the listeners for tuning in. Obviously, I don't know everything, and I just was giving you my experiences, but I'm also happy to follow up with anybody who has something that they want to talk about. And I think I'll be in